Welcome back. All right, so power rankings. Tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day. I wanted to wear a green jersey, but the team that's moved up the most this week does not wear a green jersey. There's no green anywhere in anything they wear. So, that being said, and I don't have a St. Patrick's Day jersey for the Blues either. So, we're going to take a look at teams 1 through 32, and compared to last week, a lot of movement this week. There's only 4 teams that stayed in the same spot. Everybody else moves, including at the bottom of the board. So, number 32 this week, dropping 3 spots from last week, the Anaheim Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks find themselves at the bottom of the board. I don't know if they're going to stay there or not. And really, the bottom row. This kind of reminds me of the NFL power rankings I did years back where towards the end of the year I'd be like, I don't know why I'm ranking the bottom 16. I'm almost to the point where I don't know why I'm still ranking the bottom 8, but you gotta do it till the end of the year. So at least for another 4 power rankings after this, and then we're all done. So week 22, you go 26 weeks and power rankings are done. But Anaheim's 32nd this week. We'll see if they stay 32nd next week. All right, number 31. Dropping 1 spot from last week, the Sharks. San Jose back down to 31st. They have 1 win in their last 10 games, and they're playing out the string. It definitely looks like they're playing out the string. The effort's still there. The talent, the top-end talent really isn't. But, San Jose, they will still make you work for it, but just 1 win in their last 10 tells you teams are figuring out how to work for it. Number 30, their opponents tomorrow as well. So if you want a game to set your PVR for, this isn't it. The Chicago Blackhawks move up 2 spots this week. Bedard's playing really well. I think the Hawks are playing well, and well enough anyways to move up a couple of spots. I don't anticipate them moving up the board much further than this, but, they've extended the career of Nick Foligno, so there's a bonus right there. It just feels like Foligno might have been leaning towards retirement, maybe, or at least thinking about it. But in Chicago, he's doing quite well, so there's no reason to even think about it right now. He's around a point per game over the last month. All right, number 29, dropping 3 spots from last week. Columbus. The Blue Jackets, they did get the win tonight over San Jose. But again, Columbus playing out the string at this point, and they drop a few spots from where they were last week. 23, 33, and 11, I believe, is their record. So, yeah, the teams in this area are teams that they knew their season was over a while ago. The good news for them in Columbus, Nylander, where did that come from? I'm bewildered. Alex Nylander suddenly looks like he belongs in the National Hockey League after how many false starts? So this is why you don't necessarily call a guy a bust. Maybe ever. Anyways, moving on to number 28. Moving up 3 spots from last week. The Senators from Ottawa, as opposed to the Senators from Vancouver, I guess. The Senators winning some games, and again, they're not anywhere near the race. It is, again, the Ottawa Senators putting up some wins at the end of the season. I'm not going to say it's going to roll over into next season or they're building any momentum. We heard all of that last year, and it really didn't turn out that way. The trick for Ottawa is October and November. Have good months of October and November, and we won't see them in this position next season. If they have another bad October, November in 2024, likelihood 2025 they miss the playoffs yet again. Number 27, same spot as last week. Didn't move up. Didn't move down. The Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes, they're playing out the string as well, but they got a win today, and they've had wins here and there. They're proving that they can be tough to play against. And again, I think it's just there's no pressure. I think the 14-game winless streak might have been kind of tough, and so, you got your pride. You got to fight for your pride. So the Arizona Coyotes, staying ahead of these 5 teams. I don't anticipate them moving up much if they're going to move up. But a team at number 26 did move up this week. Moving up 2 spots from last week. Les Canadiens de Montréal. The Montreal Canadiens move up 2 spots this week. And again, they can play spoiler. Teams in this row can play spoiler. That's where we're at this year. Or at this point in the year with these teams. The Montreal Canadiens move up a couple of spots. And we'll see whether or not they're in the bottom row the rest of the season. Probably. But there are teams outside the bottom row that could end up down here. Number 25. And I don't know if they've been in the bottom row ever. And I know I did the all-time power rankings. I guess I should have I could ask Yvonne, but she's not home yet. So, number 25, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Penguins drop down to this level. The Pittsburgh Penguins are 2-7-1 in their last 10 games. It's a tough time. I can't think of any time Pittsburgh's been in this position this late in the season. Like last year, they missed the playoffs, but they were right there until the very end. Basically, game 81-82, they were right there and absolutely could have made the playoffs instead of Florida. This year, they don't look like they're going to finish near the playoffs. They're currently 7 points out. I mean, there's games in hand on teams around them. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. So there's your bottom row. And again, I don't know that Pittsburgh's ever been in the bottom row. Number 24, moving up one spot from last week. It would have been more than one spot, but then New Jersey shoots themselves in the foot in Arizona today, so it's not more than one spot. The New Jersey Devils, highly likely to finish above 500, but compared to the expectations coming to this season, it's been an absolute disaster. And the defense has been mostly a disaster. I don't know how you fix this. Because the question now becomes, okay, so New Jersey had this ridiculously bad year. What are they going to do to fix this for next season? What's the plan going to be? So New Jersey's going to be under the gun, I think, this summer to make the right moves and make improvements, especially on the blue line. I think their forward group is just fine. Obviously, their goaltending, they need to solidify that spot. Maybe Jake Allen becomes that guy in New Jersey that he hasn't been for a while in the National Hockey League, but there's a lot of uncertainty around the New Jersey Devils. Number 23, dropping one spot from last week. I was hoping they'd move up. But the Buffalo Sabres, they lose that game today, and that's after the big win against the Islanders. They're just really up against it. I don't think they make the playoffs. Losing that game today, and again, it's asking for them to go on a ridiculous run. So the one thing with Buffalo is, because of the record they've had, that they've accumulated, they have to go on a really, really strong run for a prolonged period of time. And that's hard at this time of the season since there are so many teams that are playing playoff hockey. So I do commend Buffalo for keeping themselves in the conversation. I just wish they'd played this way the whole way through the season, and then they'd be above the playoff line. Number 22, dropping 6 spots from last week. It was a rough week for Detroit. The Detroit Red Wings have gone from top row to the third row over a period of 3 weeks. No, 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. They've gone from 6th to 22nd in 2 weeks. It's been a disastrous fall. So maybe the game against Buffalo is a sign of things turning around, but they have not looked anything like a playoff team. They haven't looked like anything resembling a playoff team. We'll see if Detroit can get things going. Tomorrow, they are in Pittsburgh. So that's a key game right there that could decide whether or not Detroit stays above the playoff line, whether or not Pittsburgh's officially going to be done soon. That's a big game. It could feel like a playoff game. I would say of tomorrow's games, that might end up being the most entertaining of the bunch. Although New Jersey's against Vegas and the way they've been playing, who knows what you're going to get. Number 21 on the board this week, dropping 4 spots from last week. And I feel bad for Seattle because I know there's been a lot of talk like, hey, Seattle's going to get this together. They're going to make the playoffs. I just didn't. The math didn't work on at least to me. I would love to see Seattle in a playoff series against the Vancouver Canucks. That'd be great, right? If Vancouver somehow ended up finishing atop their division and if Seattle ended up being the wild card they played against, I think that would be absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, the road trip would be pretty easy for these teams, right? But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So Seattle with the loss tonight and all that, they've just fallen out of contention. I had to make moves this week based on who's still, I think, in contention for a playoff spot versus who isn't. Number 20, moving down 2 spots from last week. And I don't think they're in contention for playoffs at this point. And I don't think their fans are going to be mad for me saying they're not really in playoff contention. But they're not double digits behind. They got the win tonight against Montreal. We'll see if they can build on that. The Calgary Flames, it's been just one of those years. It looks like they're back to being a team that's pretty good, maybe just below the playoff line, which in my mind I'm going, isn't that how things were with Jarome Iginla towards the end? It feels like we're into that kind of an era again where Calgary's good enough not to be seen as a rebuilding awful team, but not quite good enough to be in the playoffs, and that's kind of the worst spot to be in because you need to make changes, but you don't want to overcorrect either. So we'll see how Calgary does in the coming weeks. They're not officially out, but they're pretty close. Next up, Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild move up 2 spots from last week. They did get the point tonight against St. Louis. Their odds of making the playoffs are not great, but they're only 3 points back of Vegas. So the potential is still there for the Minnesota Wild. They did come back in that game tonight against St. Louis. So I do hope, and for Marc-Andre Fleury too, it'd be great to see them back in the playoffs. It would. Even though I don't know if Minnesota could get out of a first round matchup against almost anybody in the West, all you have to do is make it there. Like, for all of the discussions over, oh, these teams never win, eventually teams do. And so, who knows? Maybe Minnesota's an underdog, goes on a bit of a run. Number 18, dropping 3 spots from last week. So I'm at a point now with Philadelphia where I have concerns. So today against Boston, for instance, they had points where they looked really good. But they also had points where they really didn't. And for Philadelphia, if they do make the playoffs, they definitely look like a team that could get swept in the first round. And that's reality. They also look like a team right now that could end up on the outside looking in at the playoffs. I keep waiting for a rally that I don't know if it's going to come. The loss against Toronto was one thing, but that loss tonight against Boston, I don't see that rally happening. The 3 goals in rapid succession by Boston, you can't be doing that when you're fighting for a playoff spot. So Philadelphia drops out of the top 16 this week. We'll see if they get back up there. I don't anticipate it. They've won 4 of their last 11. Number 17, moving up 6 spots from last week. So the biggest mover this week is St. Louis. Yep, the Blues, almost in the top 2 rows. Almost. The win over Minnesota tonight, good, and they're playing well. Binnington is playing some of his best hockey of the season, which is impressive because he's had a very strong run this season. And St. Louis currently sits, 4 points out of the playoffs? Yeah, they're 4 points behind Vegas, and tomorrow they're at home against Anaheim. So that's a very winnable game for St. Louis. They can win that. If Vegas loses, suddenly they're within 2 points. And maybe St. Louis ends up knocking Vegas out of that last playoff spot, which nobody saw coming a few months ago. Number 16, moving up 4 spots from last week. This was the jersey I thought I was going to be wearing. I really expected the Washington Capitals would be the biggest mover this week. The funny thing is they get destroyed by Edmonton. Just absolutely annihilated. Then they beat Seattle and they beat Vancouver on the road. And that's impressive. Even though Vancouver's had their issues lately and Seattle's here on the board, I'm very impressed with how Washington bounced back from that ridiculous loss against Edmonton. And they're only 1 point out of a playoff spot. So I think Washington's played well enough. It's bewildering. They're back to, I don't know how they won the game, but they did. We're back to that kind of hockey with them. It really seems to be low event hockey, keep those scoring chances really low, and grit out a 1-goal win, which means they've been playing playoff hockey most of the season. So we'll see how it goes for them, should they actually qualify for the postseason. Number 15, moving up 4 spots from last week as well. So another 4-point mover, and that's the New York Islanders. So it does feel like right now the Islanders and the Capitals battling it out for that last playoff spot. Detroit's definitely fallen off a bit. The Islanders and Washington, I think those are the 2 to keep an eye on. And so, yeah, we'll see how that all turns out. It is just odd because Detroit being outside of the top 16 and they're above the playoff line and all that. Philadelphia also above the playoff line. But I have the Islanders and the Capitals ahead of them currently on the power rankings because I just think they're playing better. Number 14. I do always get a kick, though, out of but this team's this spot on the standings. I don't care. I don't have the standings on my power rankings board. I update every day. Number 14, dropping 1 spot from last week. And I think there should be a healthy amount of concern when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights. Will Vegas, A, end up making the playoffs, and then B, this whole, they're going to get Stone back and they're going to go on another run. But can they? Can they turn it on? Vegas right now looks kind of lost. I mean, they pick up Hannafin, they pick up Mantha, good, fine, they get that. Miramanov, those looks really good for Calgary, so there's that. And I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if that's enough to turn Vegas into a Stanley Cup champion again. Maybe it keeps them above the playoff line, but the idea that, now they're going to win it again, I really don't know that they can. This team does not look like last year's team at all. Number 13, dropping 1 spot from last week as well. The LA Kings. So the Kings just dropping the one spot. Obviously, the Kings in Vegas fighting it out for third spot, or maybe a wild card spot, or maybe fighting to hold off teams like the Blues for wild card positions. So the LA Kings don't want to play Dallas anymore, and I felt like, okay, so Dallas has their number. That's fine. That happens. You'll have certain teams that have your number. And so the LA Kings just dropped the one spot from this week, but we'll see if they maintain that spot next week. And then we get into the top 12, and I think the top 12 is pretty solid, to be honest. Not that these teams are liquid. That's just not how things work. But number 12, moving up 2 spots from last week. I'm not sure what to make of Tampa Bay's win today over Florida. And here's why. Florida outplayed them. I think Florida outplayed them, but Florida lost. And so Tampa Bay gets the win. They get the 2 points. Vasilevsky, 47 saves, was absolutely fantastic. Is Tampa Bay in the conversation as a contender? I don't think so. But when you've got a team that's won 2 Stanley Cups recently, can you really rule them out? So that's where I'm kind of at with Tampa Bay at this point. And they do, as I said, move up 2 spots this week. Number 11, same spot as last week. I really feel like Dallas is in the right spot. So Dallas gets that win tonight over LA. LA's here. Dallas gets shelled by New Jersey this week. And just some rough results overall. The Florida game, they lose that one as well. They had the 3-goal lead. I just feel like for Dallas, that's the right spot for them. They're still tied for first in the division. And yeah, so Dallas doesn't move up. They don't move down. I don't know if Dallas fans are going to be mad at me or not. Probably. That's just kind of the status of things. But again, I think the teams in the top 12 are pretty good. And I think Dallas is in that range. I just don't think they're a contending team at this stage. Number 10, dropping 4 spots from last week. Vancouver Canucks. Back-to-back losses at home. This is where that 9-game homestand can get tricky, right? So I've talked about this, how, 9-game homestand, if it's going well, great. But if it's going bad, then you're at home. You get to hear the local media and the local fans. They're going to let you know how they think things are going. And so for Vancouver, they need to win the next one. They really do. If this homestand gets away from them, and if they keep dropping games, you don't want to be backing into the playoffs. Even if they finish first in their division and they have home ice in the first round or first 2 rounds, but you got to get out of that first round before you have that second round. And so Vancouver, I have real concerns with this team. I think they had a fantastic first half of the season. Second half of the season, they've looked average. And so we'll see which team's the real Canucks over the next few weeks here. Number 9, same spot as last week. No change for the Boston Bruins. Boston, I know they got the win over Montreal. I know they got the win over Philly. The win over Montreal, they get that one in overtime. The win over Philly, that was an ugly game. They get the 2 points. I don't think after the game Jim Montgomery's going to be happy with how they won it. I don't think he's going to be satisfied with. He'll be satisfied with the result, but it's the method. And this is what I've talked about with Boston. I don't know if this is a team that's going to go far in the playoffs. I'd love to see it. I'm a Boston fan. I'd love to see it. And this does mean that we have Boston, Vancouver, and Dallas all in a row again. And none of them are in the top row. So it's been rare this season where none of them are in the top row, but this is one of those weeks where it's happened. I really hope one of them moves into the top row next week. That being said, we'll see how it turns out. None of them play tomorrow. Number 8, same spot as last week as well. The Winnipeg Jets. So for the Jets, up and down week overall, but in the end, I mean, losing against Nashville, you'll notice Nashville's not on the board yet. Nashville's becoming a real concern in the West. I don't think anybody wants to play Nashville in the first round, and I would include Winnipeg in that conversation. I don't think anybody wants a piece of the Nashville Predators in the first round. The run Nashville's going on right now, if you want to talk about like the 2019 Blues, the 2018-2019 Blues had a fantastic second half of the season, and then they rode that momentum through the playoffs. Nashville, it feels like they've got hot at the right time. Can they run that through the playoffs? We'll see. But yeah, number 8 right now is Winnipeg. Winnipeg has a chance with a win tomorrow to create a 3-way tie with Colorado and Dallas atop the division. Kind of fun if they get there. Number 7, the aforementioned Nashville Predators move up 3 spots this week. They're in the top row. That's the first time they've been in the top row this season. It's not the first time they've ever been in the top row, but I'm pretty sure it's the first time they've been in the top row this season. The point streak's at 14 games now, I do believe. That's ridiculous. Nashville, not one of the teams that are playing tomorrow, which is probably good for everybody else in the West and for their sanity. But like tonight against Seattle, I never had any doubt they were going to beat Seattle tonight. They just went out there and played their game. It's impressive. Yossi's playing some of the best hockey he's ever played. And don't look now, but Saros, after a pretty rough first half of the season, he's been fantastic the second half of the season. Number 6, moving up one spot from last week. The Oilers. The Oilers, I think, had a really decent game tonight. They do lose against the Avalanche, which, I mean, it happens. Ask Vancouver. But I thought they outplayed the Avalanche for large stretches, and I thought they had a really good third period. And not a bad overtime either until that overtime goal went in, just in that closing second for the Colorado Avalanche. So, yeah, the Oilers, I think, pretty impressive run by them so far. And so they stay in the top row. And, I mean, they're probably too far back to catch Vancouver, but couldn't they? I mean, they could, right? It's still there. Number 5, same spot as last week. So what's interesting is, last week everybody said Toronto doesn't belong in the top row. They don't belong in the top row. Well, they're now, 10-3-1 over the last month and a bit. And 2 of those 3 losses are regulation losses against Boston, but they've been really good. And I thought they hung with Carolina. Carolina did come back and get the victory, of course, in a shootout. Toronto does need to work on locking the game down a little bit. But, yeah, they had a lead on Carolina in the third period, and I thought they had a pretty solid all-around game. So, yeah, Toronto, and I think they're getting some really good goaltending from Samsonov. The fans seem to really like Samsonov, which is great. It's been a redemption tale this season. Remember, he cleared waivers. So, and a lot of teams need a goalie, and he cleared waivers. So, yeah, Samsonov, I think, has been a really good part of a good story, and I have no problem with Toronto still being 5th. I know there will be people saying they're way too high, but they're one of the better teams in the league. Record-wise, they've been really good over the last month and a bit. Number 4, dropping one spot from last week. Carolina. The Carolina Hurricanes, they get the shootout victory tonight. They've had some big wins. Then they had the loss against the Rangers as well. For Carolina, this is not that they had a bad week. There's just a team I felt forced themselves into the top 3 this week. That I could not keep them 4th this week. That Carolina drops to 4th. I still see them as a contender. I do still have that concern with Carolina about the offense. And when they get shut out, I'm like, oh, I really hope this isn't a preview of the playoffs, because if Carolina goes all the way to a conference final and then the offense dries up again, I don't know how you fix that. You can't fire a coach when you go all the way to the conference final. But, yeah, Carolina, that's the one concern I have with that team. Maybe Gensel's the solution. Number 3, moving up one spot. And as I said, they forced themselves into the conversation. Colorado. The Avs playing some of the best hockey in the league, and I've just been very, very impressed with the team they've got put together. Plus, with Nichushkin back, I don't know if anybody in the West can stop them, to be honest. As much as I'd love to see Winnipeg go all the way to a final, or obviously Dallas go all the way to a final, I don't know if anybody can stop Colorado in the West. I think there's teams in the East that might be able to. I don't know if anybody can in the West. The Avs are getting it together at just the right time, which of course will irritate people, but it's kind of what the Avs do. And so, yeah, they forced themselves into that top 3. Which brings us to the top 2. Was there a change at number 1? Yes. Yes, there was. Number 2 this week, falling out of first for the first time in over a month. The Florida Panthers, they lost back-to-back games. That's a very, very rare thing. Florida could absolutely be back in number 1 next week. But I felt like, you know what? There's a team that I think has earned that number 1 spot this week. Ahead of the Florida Panthers, at least for right now. We'll see if that's still the case in the coming days, because the team that's passed them is playing at home tomorrow morning in a matinee game, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Florida, number 2 this week. They dropped the 1 spot, which means number 1 on the board, the Rangers, the New York Rangers, are back in first place. They haven't been in first place in a while, but they're back in first. I feel like that board's going to fall. The board keeps kind of rattling a bit. I'm like, please don't fall down. But yeah, the New York Rangers, first on the board, even though you can barely see it. But I showed you guys the puck, right? But yeah, the New York Rangers #1 this week. I think they're playing really, really well, firing in all cylinders. And I don't know how the playoffs are going to go for them. The one thing is, we're going to see a contending top team out in the first round on the eastern side of things, and probably see a top team out on the western side too. Plus, it's been 5 years since that really bonkers first round in 2019 where everybody's brackets got broken. Mine was annihilated. I feel like we could be seeing a year like that again this year. And it's not just because three teams that I root for could have home ice in the first round and I have this whole cataclysm in my mind. But yeah, I think this could be a year where we see somebody end up being knocked out in the first round that we're expecting to go a long way. It does feel like we could see kind of a shocker, but maybe, maybe not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you have not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. We have 4 more power rankings to go, and then I'm done because then it's playoff time, and then we just enjoy the playoff hockey. So thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.